Hello, listeners, and welcome to a review episode with yours truly, Iron Enoch, and I hope you guys are all doing well and staying safe out there today. During these episodes, I typically will give you my personal thoughts and opinions and just an overall review of a certain item of some kind, either like a show, a book, a game, a piece of tech, or anything of those kind of nature. Typically, these are cut up into about 6 different sections where I go over an explanation of whatever I'm reviewing, my initial thoughts and everything that I've collected while reviewing the item and everything, as well as the pros and cons of it, if there are any, as well as what other people think about it, and then I typically tie it up with a summary or my final thoughts on it. At the end of the day, all of this is really just my personal opinion on these things. So typically, I like to do this just to kind of get a little more info out there for people to kind of have a better understanding of something. So that way they can draw their own conclusions from this kind of stuff. On today's episode, I'm going to be reviewing Shadows of Doubt, which is a PC early access video game that came out on April 24th of 2023. I'm going to preface a few things where everything I'm going over right now is just as of right now what the state of it is. Obviously, there's some things that might change by the time you listen to this, or even some other information that might be a little bit old. So just keep that in mind as you listen. This is also just, again, my personal thoughts on the game and everything. Everyone is entitled to their own thoughts on different matters and stuff like that. So let's get into it. Again, this game is called Shadows of Doubt, and a simple explanation of the game is that it's a immersive sandbox detective stealth game, essentially, where you get to live out your fantasy of playing a private investigator in a fully simulated sci-fi noir city, which honestly is pretty cool. Essentially, you get to walk around the city in a first-person perspective. You can explore every nook and cranny of the game, from back alleys, every single room, every single building, every single person, everything that you could talk to. Essentially, it is a complete sandbox playground that you can essentially be a private investigator in. Pretty much the game, you do have a main case that you work on, which is trying to track down and catch a serial killer. But you are also given the chance to take side jobs, which can vary depending, to essentially help you make cash so that way you can live your life in the city. So that's the initial explanation about it. Now, my first thoughts on the game. Honestly, I did not know the game existed until my really good buddy Tricky told me about it. And that was around September, near the end of September of 2023. I did not know it existed, and then he told me about it because he knew that I really liked mystery / detective type stuff. So the fact that there is this fully simulated city and everything where you can play as a private investigator, honestly, really piqued my interest. So I picked it up. Excuse me. It was on sale, so thought I'd go ahead and get it and give it a try. So I gotta say that I am pretty impressed with it. My initial thoughts, some of the really cool things that I was impressed with it by is the fact that it is a procedurally generated game. So when you first start up the game, you can choose some parameters and stuff like that you want the city to be based off of, and then the game will generate a city with citizens. And the really cool thing is that each citizen is truly unique, and just the way that it's all generated is actually pretty impressive, even though the game's still in early access. So with it being procedurally generated, that's where it's not the same every single time you play. The layout of the city, the buildings and stuff like that, like all the layouts and whatnot, they're always different every single time. So some other really cool things about that fact is that also the NPCs or the citizens walking around inside the city are also procedurally generated. But they are also assigned all sorts of stuff, like apartments that they live in, either by themselves or with a spouse if they're married. They also have jobs, their own unique name, their own unique fingerprints, as well as a daily routine, which is actually pretty pretty cool, really. There's are some games that we've seen that have these kind of mechanics in them, but the way that this one introduces these mechanics or utilizes them is pretty impressive. Um, I can say from some of the cases that I've done, some of the citizens that I've come across, I mean, like some of them only work very specific days out of the week. Like there's a day-night cycle. There's 24 hours and everything like that. Yeah, pretty standard stuff there. They all have different work schedules where some work a standard 9 to 5, 5 days a week. Others only work weekends. Other only work 3 days out of the week at very weird hours, depending on what their jobs are and everything. There's diners, bars, supermarkets, tech companies, office companies, and all sorts of stuff. It's honestly pretty impressive with how it works. And I will say, from the current playthrough that I'm doing, the city that I'm in has about 320 something citizens. So that is 320 something NPCs that are living their lives. Essentially, they go to bed at certain times. They eat. They have their own hobbies or places they like to visit during the day when they're not working, and all sorts of stuff. So the fact that you have all of these NPCs or citizens walking around everything really makes it feel like it is very randomized at that point, because it's not always the same. And then it makes the city feel like it's really being lived in. So that's kind of another thing that really makes it kind of cool. But then the other aspect is that you can fully explore the entire city, like every single building, every single apartment, every nook and cranny. As I mentioned before, you can explore. You can check out everything inside this entire game. Now, granted, obviously, just like in real life, you go into some people's places when you're not exactly welcome. Yeah, you're going to get into some trouble. And there's law enforcement and everything in the game as well. They have a full system related to that. So yeah, it's honestly pretty detailed, I will say. For a indie developer or a really small team that's been working on this game, it's honestly pretty impressive with what they've been able to do with it so far. So some other pretty cool things, kind of going back to where it's like fully simulated, where yes, they have their own apartments, jobs, routines, everything. Pretty much everything keeps happening even if you don't do anything. Like, you can literally just stay inside of your apartment inside the game and do pretty much nothing for a few days inside the game, and they will still live out their daily routines and have things happen. Cases will happen, things will come up, and everything just continues on without you. Now, where the actual private investigator part comes in, that's actually a pretty cool aspect that I've enjoyed. Where essentially it makes you really feel like you are a private investigator. So as I mentioned before, you have a main case that you're working on, which is a serial killer case, but you can also pick up other cases, which vary with what you can actually do in those cases. Either like a theft or investigation of a person, or even like vandalism, different cases like that. And typically, the way a lot of these side cases go is where you are given, okay, let's say that you're investigating a theft. So all you know is that something's been stolen. You are given a couple clues about the thief, and then you have to literally figure out everything yourself in your own way. And there are multiple ways that you can go about it. So like one case that I had to do is I had to find a certain item that was stolen. So all that they could tell me is, I think they had a first name and a basic description of the thief. They didn't know everything. All they knew is that they had shoulder length, black hair, glasses. I think actually they only had the first initial of the name, is all they could find out. So that's all you get to work with. So then from there, you have to go through the city directory, phone book records, and all sorts of stuff, or call records, all sorts of stuff like that, to find out where the person lives or where their workplace might be, all that kind of stuff. And then you have to essentially find the item to actually have evidence that they stole it. So you have to go through that entire process with only a few clues. And it's not the same every single time. You might have another theft case where all you know is maybe somehow you already know where their apartment is or their workplace. It's different every single time. So you were only given a few clues that then you have to take and figure out for yourself to find the person and then find the item and then essentially bring them in and return the item. So it's honestly pretty cool and it's actually a lot of fun. And I mean, it's all sorts of stuff from scanning fingerprints, even checking like private emails, watching CCTV footage, and just trying to find key pieces of evidence and gathering information to then find your suspect. Um, so yeah, it's honestly very detailed, and I'm honestly pretty blown away with it. So those are kind of my initial thoughts and everything that I had about the game. One other thing with that, I thought was a pretty cool thing that the developers did, is that the game includes a Twitch integration. So when you are streaming live on Twitch, the audience, the people that come in and watch you play the game, you can actually have the game import their usernames, and the citizens will actually have those names put on them. So you can essentially, in a way, investigate your viewers, which is actually kind of a cool little aspect as well. It's kind of funny to be able to see something like that when you're playing, and then all of a sudden you bump into a citizen, you learn their name, and you find out that it's someone who's sitting in your stream and everything. So, and sometimes the people in the stream get a kick out of that as well. So that's kind of an extra little detail that I thought was pretty cool that the developers put in, which kind of just, I don't know, it kind of just, it just kind of made the game feel a little bit even more like it was lived in. I don't know, I can't really explain how. It just kind of gave me that feeling. So now some cons of the game. I will say that when I first started up the game, it's early access. So we know that with that, typically they're not polished. They're going to have some issues. So I did have I think I only had maybe like one issue the first time I tried starting up the game. It was having a little hard time loading, and I was being a little impatient, and I made the game crash. But after that, I haven't had any other kind of crashing issues or anything with the game. It's only happened that once on the initial startup. After that, I haven't had any other issues. There are some bits in the game. I did get a little confused on like how to do some things at first. And some things, it does provide some tutorials and a few things that kind of help hold your hand about how to do some stuff. But there are some aspects where there's not a lot of help and you have to figure things out, which I do appreciate, but it sometimes is a little busted when you're trying to figure out some of these things. But I haven't really had any major issues along those lines. So now some of the pros, I will say, kind of going back to some of the other things I've already mentioned, the pros that I have for the game is the fact it feels very unique. I honestly have not come across really any games that are quite like this. It definitely has a unique thing going for it, with it being a procedurally generated private investigator simulation, essentially. They already have a lot of good details and good aspects in the game currently. There is kind of a bit of a formula to things about how the game still works, because again, it is just a game, so there are limitations. It's not going to be like a perfectly simulated thing. So that's kind of another con there, where it's not too perfect or anything. But honestly, that's perfectly fine by me. When there's a little bit of a formula for you to at least try to learn things, I mean, that's even how things kind of go in life. There are some patterns and stuff like that, which things almost always go towards. So having that in the game honestly isn't too much of a negative for me. And just the fact that they have a bunch of different ways that things can go down is honestly a pro for me, which I definitely enjoy greatly, actually. Some other kind of cool factors with it and stuff like that. It is a little forgiving when you're just playing on normal, so they have plenty of different difficulties for you. I'm just currently doing on a normal difficulty because I want to try to get through the game relatively quickly, or at least through this first case. To the point where there are some elements in the game that you have to worry about, like food, drink, as well as rent and stuff like that. So there's a few things along those lines. But honestly, it's once you get into a side job and learn how those go, and you can do them somewhat effectively, and you learn the mechanics of the game, side jobs become relatively easy to do, and if you pick the right ones, you can earn a decent chunk of change. So, and get some pretty useful items as well. So all in all, that's not too bad. Again, that's only on the normal difficulty. I haven't really played on any higher difficulties yet. I probably will once I complete this first main case that I'm working on. So some other cool things that it definitely gives you options on how you want to do things. So like I said previously, with some cases like theft or something like that, you can go through essentially any process you want. Where do you want to look up, like, you have a certain lead? Okay, try to find a name. Okay, once you have the name, you can then try to do stuff like, okay, either find out where they live or their work, and then you can follow leads. You can, it's like, okay, well, we know where they live. Let's go there and try to see if we can find out anything. Where do they work? Can we talk to their coworkers about anything? Have they seen anything or heard anything weird? Glean information, stuff like that. And then you actually have a case board where, just like in like TVs and or TV shows and movies and stuff like that, you can pin up notes and photos of things and whatnot, tie threads to there, and you can literally make your own case board about what you're working on, which is honestly helps me a lot because there are a lot of details that you can find. All sorts of stuff from either work IDs, addresses, like even down to like receipts and stuff like that. So there's a lot of different kind of things. So the case board definitely helps a lot with that. So when you're going all these different ways and following these different leads that you're trying to go after, it can get a little hectic. So having that to follow or at least keep track of things definitely helps. Because like you could either get a name and find out where they work and go there and check things out. Another thing that could happen is maybe you're trying to find someone and you're rummaging through the trash at their apartment and you find a receipt for a diner when they went there and ate at a certain time. So then you can then go to the diner and you can talk to the staff and either see if anyone saw the person, or even you can try to ask and get access to the security cameras and then check footage for the person and see if anything else might have happened. So there's all sorts of different ways that you can go about finding clues, which is honestly a lot of fun, and it really lets you just kind of run around and do things in the order that you want to, which is honestly a lot of fun. I've played several different types of mystery/detective games, but typically those are all curated to a very linear story, so which isn't a bad thing. It's just that it's kind of nice where you get the freedom to be able to run around and do something. So yeah. Now, what others think about the game? So I will say, since it's only on PC, it's currently only available on Steam at the time that I am making this episode. And currently, the Steam reviews are actually very positive, is the rating that it has right now overall. So a lot of people do enjoy it. A lot of people are kind of hoping to see what the future is going to hold for it. Now, a lot of the reviews that I've been kind of going over here and everything, majority, a very large majority of them, essentially go over how the individuals had a lot of bugs. Now, from what I can see, is a lot of these are either from the time around the time that I picked the game up to almost now in October even, or the middle of October. Some people are having some bug issues with it, apparently, where they're having a hard time even getting the game to run and everything. Or even some people are having like game-breaking bugs, is where a majority of these are coming from. Other people are not entirely impressed with the fact that they can figure out the formula for the game, and that it becomes super repetitive for them. And then even some other people talking about how the game just doesn't have as much as it's presumably offering to have. Which I do agree to a point on this. It definitely doesn't have a whole lot in it at this time. It does have a lot of details, and I'm kind of giving it the benefit of the doubt to the point where it is early access. It's got a lot of details in it that even some bigger games don't normally have. Now, the game-breaking bugs and having really bad bugs and stuff like that in the game, that I honestly can't really attest to or say anything about because I haven't. Besides the one time the game broke when I first started it and it froze up and stopped on me, after that I have not really had any major bugs. At least nothing game breaking. I never had anything keep me from finishing a case. It was actually typically me not being able to, I guess you could say, I would like overlook something that was extremely obvious, which then I kept myself from, you know, successfully finishing a case, which then took me longer than I'd like to admit, to get correct. So yeah. But all in all, I personally haven't had any major issues. My system definitely isn't like top tier or anything like that. The game doesn't really require much to play. It's not a super demanding game. So that's where my PC was able to run it very easily at some pretty high, at the higher settings for graphics and stuff like that. After a little bit of tweaking. So yeah, a lot of these I can't really, I'm guessing it's more just these individuals had trouble with it on their computers. And then just besides like a few people here and there saying stuff like, again, them figuring out the formula for how to play the game and stuff like that, in which case it just becomes repetitive, which I can definitely understand that. I could definitely see how this game would get repetitive if you played it that way. So yeah. But otherwise, a majority of people really seem to enjoy the game. They really want to see where it's going to go. So that's where a majority, out of the near 6,000 reviews, 5,500 of them is positive. And they all really like how it is and everything. Some people are even kind of laughing at the fact that it's like, well, some aspects of the game honestly are maybe a little bit busted, but it actually kind of even helps challenge the game a little bit more, which is kind of cool. But yeah, no, a lot of people really like the concept and everything, which is probably the biggest thing that I like about the game. Is just the fact that it has a lot of things going for it. So it's just going to be a matter of seeing essentially what's going to happen in the future. So now my final thoughts on the game. Really, I've kind of touched over a lot of things already. It's just that my final thoughts on the game, the number of things you can do in it is pretty impressive. I do have high hopes for the game. If it stays as is this is kind of the biggest thing that we see with indie developers, and even some other bigger developers and stuff like that, that we see in the gaming industry nowadays, where typically if a game comes out and it's met with a lot of opposition, and sometimes even if a game doesn't meet opposition a lot, sometimes the game just kind of goes to a certain point and then stops in its tracks for different reasons. Maybe the developers essentially lost interest. Maybe they did not get what they were expecting out of it, or they weren't expecting the type of feedback that they wanted or were expecting. People don't enjoy the game, so then they typically stop working on the game. So we will see what happens with this one. It has received a number of updates since its release, which has apparently fixed a number of issues and such. So there is some high hopes here. Not long after they released it, they did release a update that included more types of side cases and different types of things that can happen. So the fact that they put something out like that relatively shortly after they released it, definitely does kind of help. So we're just gonna have to kind of sit back and see what they do with it. At this moment, for the current price and to pick up the game and everything, it's definitely not too bad. You can definitely get enjoyment out of it. If you like a good mystery where you want to run around and figure out what's going on, I would definitely recommend it. If you're a little skeptical and stuff like that about it, I would say at that point, wait for it to go on sale, pick it up on like a summer sale or winter sale or anything like that, and you could definitely get a bit of time of enjoyment out of this game. So yeah, beyond that, Shadow of Doubts definitely is a fun game. I enjoyed a lot with the number of different things that you can figure out. If you play it where you're just trying to learn the system and play it that way, you will kill the mood quickly for yourself, most likely. I've done that with a number of games. But if you're just trying to play it as a detective, trying to figure things out, just go through, not really worrying about how the game works, but more just trying to play the game as it plays, then you'll get some good fun out of it. And again, the system requirements aren't too bad for it. You don't need a supercomputer to be able to play something like this. It is a pretty fun game all around. So, and honestly, it actually has a pretty unique graphic style to it as well. So, but there you go. Those are my thoughts and my review on the video game known as Shadow of Doubt. And hopefully you guys glean a little bit of information from this so you at least kind of understand what the game is so that you can go into it and have a look at it for yourself and see what you thought. And if you have any thoughts on anything, or if you have any requests for other review episodes, put them on down in the Q&A section of this episode, and I'll have a look and see what I can do. Otherwise, thank you guys very much for listening, and I'll catch you guys next time. Keep it classy.